From an economic point of view, particularly an economic growth point of view, there's very little difference between a traditional Democrat and a traditional Republican. But there is a big difference between a far-left progressive and a right-side, probably nationalist, would be a reasonable way to describe Donald Trump. Those policies are much different. So if you think about it as spending, all right, there's a range like this of government spending in which where you're in the Goldilocks range. There's not too much and there's not too little, all right? Republicans like to be on the bottom end of that range. Democrats like to be on the top end of that range. But they have traditionally liked to stay in the Goldilocks range. We have candidates now that are suggesting being way outside that Goldilocks range. Businesses don't know where we're going to end up. So what's happening right now is we're seeing businesses pull back on the amount of investment they're doing until they can figure out what the playing field is going to be politically. Part of the reason why we see a slowdown in job growth is we're sort of out of workers, and we've been out of workers for quite a while. So if we look at the hourly wage numbers here and in Detroit and in the rest of the country, what we're seeing is that wages in West Michigan are growing about twice as fast as they are in the rest of the country or in Detroit. And part of that is that our companies are starting to have to compete for workers with other areas other than West Michigan. And in order to do that, we're having to try and bring our wages closer to what the rest of the country is paying. West Michigan has a very large exposure to exports. We export more than $5 billion worth of goods every year. And a large chunk of those have to do with either automotive or agriculture. Both of those areas have been hit hard by the trade sanctions that have happened worldwide over the last year and a half. What we're seeing is that as those executives are looking forward into next year, they're seeing that we're getting closer to the USMCA being ratified and done, and that there's been a little bit of a cooling with China. So even though we're not seeing the type of growth that we saw 5 years ago in exports, we're seeing firms that do export anticipating about twice as much export growth as they had last year. The best thing we have going is people are employed, their wages are going up, and we have a pool of young workers that is larger as a percentage of our population than in most places in the United States. Those young people will give us legs and help support our economy even as things slow. Well, as we exited 2019, we were actually, by many measures, in a manufacturing recession, a recession affecting just the manufacturing and maybe the transportation sectors in the United States and in Michigan. In fact, the number of hours worked in manufacturing in Michigan dropped 4% year over year, not including the strike month of October. All right. So what we're seeing is, and what we're worried about as we go into 2020, is will that recession in that sector spread out into other sectors of the economy?